Okay, we're going to do some more quotes in alphabetical order. The first quote is by a guy named Kenneth Robertson, and he just has one good quote. He said, "The Russians have never put a man on the moon. They're afraid he might defect." Okay, the next guy is Daniel Robinson, and he made some really good DVD courses over at thegreatcourses.com on philosophy. Like he made a good one about the Greek philosophy, for example, and he made a good one on psychology too. He said, actually, I don't even have any quotes on him. I'm just telling you, I like him. He's good. There might be videos for him on YouTube. Most of those greatcourses.com guys have good lectures on YouTube. All right, the next guy we're going to talk about is Halbert Robinson. Okay, the only thing I know about Halbert Robinson is he wrote a good essay about people with very high IQs. And he says that within the top 1% of the IQ distribution, there is at least as much spread of talent as there is from the first to the 99th percentile. And my experience, from being around some pretty smart people at Harvard, at Stanford, at Northwestern and whatnot is the smartest of the smart people, they behave differently. What I mean by that is smart people work hard and they get good grades, okay? But the really smart ones, they're not just trying to get a grade. They really want to learn the material, so they're much more interested in talking about it. Like I hung around in biology class, and there's a lot of pre-meds trying to get an A in the class to try to get into med school. And yeah, they're smart. Let's put them in the IQ range of like 130 to 150. But the smartest of the smart guys, some of the guys I hung around with the IQs over 150, they want to go bird watching. They'll want to have this long, detailed discussion of, ecology, population biology. They're going to want to read all these books outside of the stuff in the class to discuss. For example, I considered becoming an evolutionary biologist, and I have friends that did research in evolutionary biology, genetics on Drosophila melanogaster, and I used to go bird watching with these guys, and we would be talking about all this stuff, and they will have read Stephen Jay Gould, and do you agree with Stephen Jay Gould? Do you disagree with Stephen Jay Gould? Do you agree with Paul Ehrlich? Do you disagree with Paul Ehrlich? All that kind of stuff. So they didn't just want to get a grade. They wanted to really know the field. And they're the smartest ones, and they're the ones that are going to do original work in the field, not just try to get a grade in the class. Okay, the next thing from Halbert Robinson, he says, extraordinarily gifted children often seem not merely bright and competent, they are perceived as different and strange, and they are often unsettling to those with whom they interact. And I think that was part of the problem with my ex-wife. My IQ is just like many standard deviations higher, and she literally did think I was strange. To me, it was just a normal thing to read, whereas in her mind, why the heck would you want to read one of these medical books, which was painful for her to have studied when she was a student, and why would I do that for pleasure? It's like, that was like, didn't make sense, didn't compute. Because also I think a lot of times too, my wife grew up poor. When a person grows up poor, they just want to get an education, figure out a way to make money, and then not have to be poor anymore. Versus for me, I never had to really think about money. My father made plenty of money, so I was lucky in that sense. But I wanted to achieve something. I wanted to become great at something. I wanted to discover something. I don't know how to explain it, but my interest in learning the last thing about a subject I was interested in was something that other people couldn't understand. Because I wanted to know. I wanted to get good. And I also felt a sense of having failed at wrestling, because I could have been a great wrestler, national champion, etc. And once I got injured and I didn't achieve as much as I wanted in wrestling, I'm like, I got to make up for it in academics. So anyways, whatever. It worked for me. It motivated me. Okay, Halbert Robinson continues. He says, these children are at risk for greatness. And the ways they differ from others is something we should nurture rather than minimize. And I think that's true, that if you study the history of golden ages, the golden age of the ancient Greeks in Athens, classical antiquity, the ancient Greeks, classical Greece, let's say from about 480 BC to 323 AD. They nurtured genius from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle, the playwrights, Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles, Aristophanes, all these guys, okay? Pericles, Thucydides, all right? Whereas, in the modern world, you get beaten up and harassed and punished for doing top-level work. It's actually true. There's very few areas in life other than sports and a few areas of science, etc., where great work is actually desired. Okay, when I say great work, I mean something that benefits everybody. everybody wants to make money. So if you're making money, that's appreciated. But, in medicine, if you're a genius, you have to be really quiet and hide it because you'll get in big trouble. It's just a fact. Okay, so let's see, what else is he talking about? What I'm trying to say is you don't need that many people to have a golden age of geniuses if you nurture genius, okay? Bell Labs, the Italian Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance in Florence, Italian Renaissance in Rome. Read about Edinburgh, Scotland during the late 1700s. There's that book, How Scotland Invented the Modern World by Arthur Herman. There's like one genius after another in Scotland in the late 1700s. The Adam family of architects, okay? Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations, okay? Men and writers like Walter Scott, the great Scottish writer, sort of wrote the first historical novel with Waverley and, set the trend for that. And there were other brilliant ones too. Lord Kames, I think it was, and there were others with his theory of history, cyclic theory of history, etc. Anyways, so that's why I think, and also look at people like the Polgars, Polgar and the Polgar daughters, sisters who were great chess players. The father decided he wanted his kids to be genius. If you have a nurturing environment, there's a lot more intelligence and talent out there than people realize. And the other thing I would say is, all those places I've been, and Halbert Robertson wrote about students testing with IQs as high as 180s to over 200. I'm like, where the hell are they? Okay, I've been in medicine a long time. Look on the internet. How come there's so few genius level teachers, doctors, whatever on the internet? There's not that many, okay? Why is it? Because I think most of them aren't really genius. I think most of them are just talented, and talent wants money. Talent wants to do its job well, collect a paycheck, and go home. Talent doesn't care about greatness or genius. Genius is more about trying to transform a field, make it better, okay? And that requires sort of like a monomaniac, and there's not that many of them. But you have to be a little bit nutty, or you're not going to focus all your energy in such a narrow thing. Okay, let's see. Let's go to the next guy here. This is Ken Robinson. He's sort of famous for his TED Talks. He's a nice TED Talk guy. Talks about how education has to be more tailored to the child. And he says education does not need to be reformed. It needs to be transformed. And that's not to standardize it, but to personalize it. And I agree with that. Anybody agree with that? And that's why homeschooling's better, because homeschool is personalized. The parents know the kid better than anybody else, and they let the kid do what the kid wants, read in this area of interest. People would be so much more talented. People, try to pretend the modern age is progress. No, the modern age is bullshit. Look at this. We haven't made any progress in diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, and hardly any in cancer in the last, 70 years in medicine. It's bullshit. The only thing that keeps getting better is technology, and the technology is being used to enslave us, okay, to control us. So very little scientific achievement. Peter Thiel's talked about this. He says, the university with all this woke BS and this other nonsense, they're hiding the fact that they suck, okay? They're not discovering anything. They're not inventing anything. Most of this genetic DNA research is all BS, okay? How many diseases have you seen cured with stem cells, okay? It's BS. Genetic medicine, precision medicine, genetic testing, it's all BS, okay? These diseases, they're not genetic diseases, hypertension, diabetes, coronary artery disease, abdominal pressure syndrome, autoimmune disease, cerebral vascular disease, dementia. It's all BS. I think the billionaire perverts want to clone themselves, okay? It really has nothing to do with helping the pros, okay? All right, Ken Robinson continues. He says, the gardener does not make the plant grow. The job of the gardener is to create optimal conditions for growth. Yeah, and the perfect example of that is that lady, Donalyn Miller, the lady who wrote the book Whisperer. What she did is she's the one who put all the bookshelves in the room, books on the tables, told the kids, read whatever you want, and nurtured an environment, gave them time to read. Say, this class will be devoted to reading. Just read all class. They'd only have to give a 3-minute presentation on the books. And that got everybody interested in books and talking about them. And her kids read an average initially of 43 books per year, 6th graders. But later on, she said she'd have classes that would read 55 books a year. And her kids are in the top 10% in like everything. So that's how kids get good at school, when they like it. Okay, Ken Robinson, anything else he has to say? He says, teaching is an art form where people teach themselves if you create the right conditions. If you can light the spark of curiosity in a child, they will learn on their own without further assistance. A good teacher creates a good microclimate for learning. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, we'll do one more quote person, and then we'll call it a day. This is a French guy, François de la Rochefoucauld. Okay, he lived from 1613 to 1618, and he says, the best way to rise in society is to use all possible means of persuading people that one has already risen in society. To be clever, it is clever to know how to hide your cleverness. It takes ability to know how to conceal one's ability. Those who busy themselves with small matters become incapable of greatness. Yeah, you got to focus on what you care about, not on trivia. And often we get sucked into trivia with our daily jobs for making money because that's the only way we know how to make money. He says, we only acknowledge small faults in order to make it appear that we are free from great ones. Tone of voice, facial expressions, and the speaker's manner can prove as eloquent as choice of words. Great minds suggest much in few words. Mediocre minds have the gift of talking a great deal and saying nothing. How true is that? It's kind of like what Schopenhauer said. Okay. Grace of movement is to the body what clear thinking is to the mind. You could say agility. Okay, to establish oneself in the world, one should do all one can to seem established already. It's just another translation of the same quote. We always like those who admire us. There is no better proof of a man's ability of being a truly good man than his desiring to be constantly under the observation of good men. Okay, and again, that's a little bit like Machiavelli's quote. Machiavelli said, you can get a pretty good sense of a leader by the quality of people he surrounds himself with. Okay, so a scumbag is going to surround himself with scumbags. A good man's going to surround himself, want to be around good men. Okay, he continues, mediocre minds dismiss anything which reaches beyond their understanding. No persons are more frequently wrong than those who will not admit they are wrong. Agility is to the body what clear thinking is to the mind. Okay, like grace. He that would be a great man must learn to turn every accident to some advantage. There's some truth in that in the sense that a lot of bad stuff happens to everybody and disappointments and sadness, and it's good to sort of say to yourself, can I make anything good come out of this? What good can come out of this? Okay. Anyways, I hope you found those helpful.